I don't care what anybody says. You're never going to stop learning. So any of these guys that pat themselves on the back that know everything, they're just foolish because it's always changing.
You want to feel the difference. And when that rod tip is too stiff, that very subtle, different pull is indiscernible from those little taps.
People will go up, they don't see bass popping, they make a couple casts, they leave. But they don't take the time to try and figure out what's going on under the surface.
You know, we'll sit there, do 5 of those drifts and not catch one fish and just go. They'll just keep going to the next spot. Right. Not me, I'm staying there.
You know, you have that moment with all sorts of species of fish where you realize you are not the one that's got the upper hand in the fight, and I realized that very quickly. That fish, it took off, it dug my rod tip right into the water.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong live stream and podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I'm the host of the show. Our regular co-host Ed Gobo has off this week because this is the Salt Strong Coaches Show, and I'm going to bring our coach on with us right away. So welcome back to the stream, Pat Ogletree. How you doing?
Doing awesome. If I was doing any better, then it'd be 2 of us. Yeah,
there you go. Well, you've had the really good fishing weather where you are. I mean, are you still in Texas actually?
Yeah, I'm in Rockport right now. I'm actually leaving Wednesday and heading down to South Padre Island. But yeah, weather's been good. It's just, you know, you got to time it in between the winds. You know, that's Texas fishing for you.
Yeah, and right now, just to give you a taste of what we're doing right now, it is snow and sleet outside right now, and it's not going to accumulate or anything, but it's a little bit different in what we're dealing with right now. And we have in my area coming up on Wednesday is the opening of striped bass in New Jersey backwaters. And I don't think that this is really going to do much to slow down that opening. I think we're going to be on fire. There's people going to be all over. As a matter of fact, for those that are insider members and watching, I'm going to be out on the water on Wednesday for opening day. So if you can take a day off and you have a kayak and you want to meet up, I will be posting in the community after this stream is over where I'm launching from and what time, and maybe we can get out on the water together.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time. We just did a insider meetup here in Rockport, and we had probably 24 people show up, and it was a great time. It was all insider community members, and you know, put some names to the faces that you see on the blog post, and got to meet them and hit the water together, and we had a great time. That's always fun, get to fish with some people that you've never fished before, or you might have talked to them in the community or even talked to them online but never met them. So that's always a cool thing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's always tough in the winter and the spring, especially for us as kayak fishermen, because I'm always a little leery about going out with people that I don't know when the water temperature is dangerous. And right now we're in the mid to low 40s. So it's not like it really, it's not as cold as it gets in typical winters, but it is dry suit time. So I'm hoping that if anyone wants to go out on Wednesday, you have a dry suit, because there's nothing worse than going out with somebody and worrying all day that if they go in, you're now on rescue detail. It can be a little stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even imagine that, to be honest with you.
It's cold, and a little thing, the dry suits, they do keep you dry-ish, but water can still get in. So you end up, when you get out, you're happy because you're not totally drenched, but you're still damp underneath, and it can get a little chilly. I've had a dunking in the March water, so hopefully I don't do that again, but it's not a fun experience.
No, that doesn't sound like. Yeah, so I can imagine that opening day is going to be like, say, opening deer season in Michigan, where it's like a rite of passage. Everybody runs out there and hits the water.
It is. It's going to be busy on the water. It's going to be packed shorelines. Most people are going to be fishing from shore, and there are going to be a bunch of people dropping their boats at local ramps. So the ramps are going to be busy. I'm trying to find the exact launch point that I'm going to use, because I don't want to go to a boat ramp. I don't want to be anywhere near a boat ramp. at the start. But yeah, we have a couple of comments in there. I must be up north. Yes, I am actually in Pennsylvania right now. We're talking about New Jersey, and it is sleet and mixed with snow right now. It's not going to stick, but it's going to cool the waters a little bit. But we're in just such a nice trend of warm water, warm air temperatures. The winds have been blowing on the warmer days, which is heating the water. So everything says that it's going to be a very nice opening to the backwater striped bass. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So wanted to let everyone know. So this is the coaches show, which means that this is up to all of you watching right now to put any questions that I always have to hesitate. Not any question. Let's put fishing questions. We'll kindly ignore the other ones that come through. Every once in a while, we have to boot somebody out for their comments. But any fishing questions that you have, and for those that are not aware of who I am and where my zone is for fishing, I am the Salt Strong fishing coach for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And the areas that I typically fish are going to be Maryland, including the Chesapeake and the coast, up into southern New York. Although really I can talk all the way through New York and up in really to Connecticut. I do have some experience fishing a little bit north of there as well, but basically Maryland and north is my area. And, I'm talking Chesapeake Bay and the coast. So if it's saltwater or brackish water, I've probably fished for it, and I probably have some experience. And Pat, do you want to go through a quick intro into what your territory is?
Yeah, so I'm one of the fishing coaches here at Salt Strong, and I'm actually the traveling fishing coach. So my home base is my RV. I'm wherever I park it is where I fish. So my territory pretty much covers from South Texas all the way up through Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, and I go all the way up the East Coast, and I pretty much stop where Rich starts. So this year I'll actually be in Maryland. Maryland's going to be the first for me. Went all the way up to Virginia last year. So looking forward to it. And I've fished a lot of different types of water in between here and there. My targeted species are redfish, flounder, sea trout, and snook when available. And that's my happy place right there.
Wow. So I have to say I've never caught a snook. Of course, I've never fished for a snook. And I'm probably the only Salt Strong employee that can say that they've only fished Florida once in their life. So it is not my forte, but we overlap a little bit in our zones. And I'm trying to convince Pat or bludgeon him into taking the RV up to this area and fishing with me up here. So we'll see if I can get that done. I can be very, very persistent.
Yeah,
so we have
that water temp's going to have to get up there, though. I took a minimum 70. I need it above that.
Yeah, well, we'll be in the 80s, the upper 70s, and into the 80s once we hit the summer. And maybe you can come up and we can go for some backwater fluke and weak fish and stuff like that in New Jersey, or maybe we meet somewhere down in Maryland in the Chesapeake and go for some reds and some specks and that kind of thing, or some Spanish mackerel too in the Chesapeake. That would be fun. I would like to do that.
Yeah.
All right, so we have our first question in here, and I kind of touched on it, but we're just going to show it. This is from New Jersey zone. Wanted to know if there were any Salt Strong people up in our area. So from New Jersey, now in Delaware. I need some help. I'm a baby here. I am the dedicated fishing coach for that area. So if you have any questions, well, first of all, you need to be an insider to get the best contact with any Salt Strong coaches, and you just post a question in the community, and I will actually see and Pat will see in the regions that he's covering. Any of the coaches will see any questions that come through for their regions. Just put it in as an ask the coach, and it will also pop up there, and people will jump in to help you out. Not just coaches, but also insiders as well. And often they beat us to the punch, and they have just outstanding answers. So it's a great community. So this one, the next question, actually, I want to throw it to you first, Pat. This is from Pinky Davis. What do y'all think about baitcasters for inshore saltwater fishing?
Absolutely. I use them all the time. Matter of fact, on my hard bait setups, whether that be Topwater or twitch baits or jerk baits, I actually prefer a baitcaster reel. It just, for whatever reason, I don't know if I'm reverting back to my bass days, back in time, but I feel more comfortable with using a hard bait with a bait caster. Now, any of my soft plastics, I'm typically throwing spinning rods, but if it's a very regional specific thing. If you are down in the Gulf Coast, say from Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas, pretty much everybody uses all bait casters. It's very rare to see a spinning rod on a guide boat in Texas. So yeah, they hold up well. You got to get the right one. That is the disadvantage to a bait caster over a spinning reel. Say you get a Daiwa Fuego, it's about $110 reel. That's a great sealed reel for, spinning, and that'll last you a long, long time. The issue with a bait caster, because it has a lot to do with the casting, you got to spend money to get a good one. So, $100 bait caster is probably not going to last a long time, especially in salt water. They require a little bit more maintenance. You're going to have to get up there, spend a little bit more money, but I do prefer bait casters in a lot of situations.
Yeah, so I'll give my opinion on that. And I will recognize right now that fishing is different in different regions. And it doesn't always make sense that it's different. We fish different lures, we fish different tactics sometimes. The one example I often give is you come up to the mid-Atlantic, especially New Jersey and north, and you can't really pay most people to fish a dock, which is amazing. The fish are still there, and it's not just a southern thing. But we just don't do it up here. Popping corks, they're like a novelty item up here, and they work up here. Now with the bait casters, I fall into that regional difference. So I don't use bait casters to cast. And the simple reason is I've learned how to do it. I don't like it, probably because I started with spinning gear. That's how I was brought up. But the other thing is it's when you're casting for distance, especially, you have to, as Pat was saying, you have to have a good reel with a bait caster, because it doesn't just get out of the way like a spinning reel. A spinning reel, they're all going to cast the same distance, essentially, because all you need to do is flip that bail out of the way and it goes. Well, with a bait caster, you're talking about brakes and drag. You have so much stuff going into it that you have to get the high end stuff. So I use bait casters, but I use them for vertical jigging. So I use an Accurist S3 for fluke fishing when I'm vertical jigging, and I use a Penn Squall low profile when I'm tog fishing or I'm doing heavier bottom fishing like wreck fishings. But otherwise, I'm using spinning gear. But that is a personal limitation of mine, and it's just a preference. I fish with a bunch of guys that use bait casters, and they do really well. And if you learn how to cast it the proper way, you're in good shape. I mean, you're going to be just as good shape as somebody who's throwing spinning out there. All right, so I think that covers that one. We have another question. We've got them kind of coming in quick now. So let's just jump on to this next one. The next one is from Motogoon. Any tips for mangrove snapper in the Clearwater area of Florida? And as I mentioned before, that is not my forte. So Pat, I'm going to kick that at you.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have one of our staff members. He's the guy that's in charge of a lot of our affiliates. He just went out this weekend and just did a great job on mangrove snapper on the public reefs a few miles offshore. So I think what's happening right now is with the red tide that's in the area, and you got to check that red tide map to see where it's at, that these fish are doing one of two things. They're either pushing further off shore to these reefs, or they're going back into their winter haunts, and they're going back up in the creeks where the red tide isn't present. So first thing right now is you got to watch where that red tide is and then just get away from it. But the reefs are producing right now. Basically anything small, what we call greenbacks or pilchards, that's what he was using. And you can even throw artificial out there, but he had a great day out there. So check the reefs out.
Yeah, and again, I can't really add anything to that one. And we don't really have a species that's similar that I can comment. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Pat, for that answer. Here's one. This one is going to be for me, Pat, unless you want to jump in on this one as well. For opening day striper season, should I think small baits for schoolies, or do you think the larger fish held over and should pack the large woods? So I feel fishy that I believe that's going to be New Jersey striped bass. And it really does depend on where you're going. If you're going up north, you might want to be starting with something that's on the smaller size. So if you're using soft plastics, I would be looking at those 4-inch, like the 4-inch mulligan or the diesel minnows. So go with the paddle tail to start, put it on a jig head, toss that out there. One thing that I do want to mention, and I've said this to insiders consistently over the past couple of months, when you're fishing for these striped bass in the colder water, even though it's not as cold as it normally is at this time of year, add some scent to that bait. So put something on there, whatever it is that you like to use. You can use menhaden oil, you can use the Procure, you can use the Dr. Juice. It's all going to work. It's all going to help. And what it does is you have these a little bit more lethargic fish in these cold waters. It gives another sense of theirs a little bit of a jolt. So when that bait is moving through the water, it's going to help them to, I guess, get inspired to expend those calories and go after that meal. Now, the way it is this year, it's warm water. It's probably around 7 to 8 degrees warmer than it quote unquote should be right now. I don't know what this front coming through today is going to do, but I would still start with those 4-inch, especially up north. Now, I will say this, and I won't tell you how I know, but I'll just say people text me things, and I have seen pictures of backwater striped bass caught out of season, released, but caught out of season in the central to southern New Jersey. I mean, I'm talking anywhere south of LBI. And you're talking anywhere from 20 to 35 to 40 pound fish being caught in the backwaters. So the monsters are there. They're staging up at tidal rivers predominantly. If you're not near a tidal river, you're going to want to look for something that's a holdover. And a holdover, by definition, is almost always going to be up to a 36-inch fish. So think anywhere from the schoolies and the rats up to 36 inches. So not the really huge guys, but definitely some slapfish in there as well. So if that's the case and you're not near a tidal river, stick again back with those 4 inches. But yeah, pack those large wood lures. They're definitely going to be working. And look, if you have some warm temperatures out there, and it looks like Wednesday we will, and we're going to have a lot of sun, they may just kick off. And if they kick off, it doesn't matter if you have rats in the area and schoolies, they're going to go after those 12-inch lures anyway. So that's my answer on that one. So thank you for the question. I feel fishy. Pat, did you have anything you wanted to add on that one?
You know, striper fishing is not something that I've done, so I'll leave that up to you.
Okay. All right. Which is funny because, I mean, you get them down in the North Carolina area quite heavily. But yeah. I guess when you're in the middle of trout, redfish territory, you know, there are other things to target. Here's a question for you. This is a good one. And this is one that I always think when I watch your videos. I keep looking for this. So Pat, have you started throwing the topwaters yet? And do you want to give it a little background as to why that's a common question for you?
So a few years back, in my saltwater journey where I'm trying to get better at inshore fishing, one thing that I really love, I love fishing topwater lures. So instead of just dabbling around with the topwater lure, trying to figure out what's working and what doesn't work, I literally dedicated a whole year of fishing to throwing nothing but topwater. So from January 1st all the way to December 31st, every trip, every cast that was made was with a topwater lure. So, by doing that, I ran across just about every situation that you can come across when it comes to topwater lures. And of course, in the wintertime when it was cold, that was more of learning how to work the baits and even modifying a little bit to get them the way that you want, trying to figure out the leader material that you want and the line size and all that. But come springtime, when that started rolling around, had a lot of things dialed in and had a pretty good year. But yeah, I threw nothing but topwater for an entire year and I learned a lot from it. So to answer your question, have I started throwing topwater yet? I don't stop throwing topwater unless it's really, really cold. But I have thrown topwater, especially back home in Florida. If we get those spells that, we get a week or so of warm weather at the end of that warming trend, you can catch fish on topwater, in Florida, in the wintertime in December, January, done that. But my key, the clue that I'm looking for outside is whenever I see that hatch that happens. So you get the fry bait that comes out of the back creeks, so the mullet will go up into these back creeks. They spawn during the wintertime. When that hatch comes out and I start seeing that fry bait, that's when I start throwing topwaters. I'll begin with a smaller topwater lure, and then as that bait increases in size, then I'll go to a bigger topwater lure that makes more noise. So yeah, right now is literally, this is the time to start throwing topwater where I'm at, below that Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah, I'll say up here, you can still catch them on topwaters. It's opening day striped bass. Go ahead and throw a topwater, especially if you're talking at the change of the night into day. So early morning from full dark into light, and then also in the evening. And it's not that they won't hit it all day; they will. I do know some guides that take their clients out and they fish nothing but topwater all summer for striped bass in the backwater. So they will hit it all day. But you're going to find a better opportunity for it if it's first light, last light at this time of the year. So am I bringing a topwater on Wednesday when I'm hitting the water? Yep. But I'm only bringing one. So if I lose it, I'm done. I'm done with the topwaters. But yeah, I just love that story about just fishing for a year. For full disclosure, Pat, I thought you were insane when you started doing that. And then by the end, when you said I'm finished, I just looked at him like, well, that's a legend right there. He just did a full year of nothing but topwater. This guy's going to be the one that's going to tell me exactly what I'm doing wrong. So great answer to that. Next one. This is another one that's going to be for you. And we're still on the mangrove snapper. So any lure recommendations for targeting mangrove snapper from shore, like inlets and passes? And actually, I'll add a second part to that, Pat. Is it any different than if you're fishing from, well, we're talking inlets and passes, so maybe we should talk boat. Some of those inlets down there, I wouldn't go near with a kayak.
Yeah, well, basically what you've got, the difference, he's talking about from shore and inlets. The major concern is going to be current. So if you're fishing an inlet, I like to use smaller lures. These mangrove snapper are not shy. If you can get a lure in front of them, then they'll pretty much eat it. I like using smaller paddle tails like our 2.0 series, which is a 3.5-inch paddle tail. Whatever color you want. I like the Slam Shady, which is a white and silver color. And small shrimp imitations like our Power Prawn USA Junior. Those work really well, but you really have to figure out where the fish are staged at and use the appropriate amount of weight depending on the depth and how fast that current is going. Obviously, the deeper it is and the faster that current's going, the more weight that you'll have. Now, again, that's with inlets. So you're fishing inshore, you can get away with, a lot lighter weight because there's a lot less current there. But any small bait, you just got to figure out about that depth where they're going to be staged at and get it in front of them. And again, they're not shy. They'll grab it.
Yeah, there was an interesting question that came up in the community this week, and I wanted to kind of touch on that, and it fits with this. One thing that you mentioned is it depends on the depth, right? And one thing that I hear commonly from people is, well, I fish from land. I don't know how deep it is, and I don't know how to tell if I hit a ledge. I don't know, I don't know how far to cast. So there are a couple things that you can do. First of all, you can, if you're an insider member, use Smart Fishing Spots. Take a look in there. You can look at the maps. You can look at all the layers. So it'll give you a navionics view. It'll give you a shaded relief view. You can see in 3D what the bottom contours look like. And you can literally zoom right in on the rock that you want to fish. I can tell you that's true because I just zoomed in on a rock today for a spot dissection that's coming out tomorrow. And I was right on the rock, and I could tell exactly where the break was and the depth out in front of it. So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing you can do is throw a couple of test lines out there. So throw it out there, let it sink. So go extra heavy for your first cast, and this is if you really want to know what you're doing. You don't have to do this, but throw out something, even if it's just a weight. Let it sink to the bottom and just drag it in along the bottom. You will be able to tell if you hit a severe ledge where it's essentially coming up at a right angle. You'll feel the weight dragging and you'll feel the line pulling across the bottom there. That's where your ledge is going to be. You'll know approximately how far out it is, and then you can work that ledge from the shore at that point. So shore-based fishing, people say, well, I can't do it, and I don't know what's going on out there. I don't know how deep it is. You have all the advantages. There are advantages to having your electronics, but there are plenty of ways that you can figure it out on your own with just a couple of casts. Just fan pattern out. Take 5 minutes when you first get there, and you can figure out where the breaks are, where the structure is. So I would recommend doing that, and that'll help you to tell how deep it is and what weight you're going to need to get to the bottom. I mean, just count in your head how long it takes for that weight to hit. If it's super quick and you know that it's pretty deep, well, maybe you can downsize that weight so you can go a little bit lighter. All right. So the next, go ahead.
I was going to add another thing that you could do with the smart fishing spots for your shore-based guys. And I use this when I'm, out fishing a location that I've never fished before. If you're fishing a long stretch of shoreline that looks all, the same, there's not variation physically of what you can see. Well, with that smart fishing spots, when you can see, the bottom of it, you can see the contours. If you see an area where that deep water is closer to the shoreline, a lot of times what happens is that wraparound is going to create an eddy, and that's going to be a great place to look at. So there's all kinds of tools that you can use to go out there and catch fish from shore. I've caught one of my biggest fish, wading from shore. So it's not, it is harder, but it's not impossible. That you just got to get a little bit more creative and use the tools that you have to your advantage.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I know some guys that will only fish from land. Even if they have an opportunity to go out on a buddy's boat or on a kayak, they insist they're land-based and they fish from land, and they will outcatch 99% of the people, whether it's flounder, whether it's, I'm talking up here, flounder, weakfish, striped bass, they will just catch and catch and catch. And it's for that reason. They understand what they're throwing into, and they're not going along those banks and just tossing randomly. They've taken a couple of minutes every time they stop to test that water. And if it's not the bottom topography that they really want, if there are no current seams and eddies, if there's nothing flowing that bait into a predictable area, that bag never came off their shoulder. They just reel that rod in and they walk another 50 feet and they toss again. And there's a spot near Stone Harbor, New Jersey, which is just like that. And it's constantly packed with people. And there's not one break in there unless you have a boat. You can't get to it. But if they go to another spot within a quarter of a mile, it's amazing. It's amazing fishing, amazing contours on the bottom, a lot of structure. And people just don't fish there because they see everyone lining that bank, so they think that's where the fish are. It's not. It's not where the fish are. I can tell you that for 50 years of experience. It's not. It's flat. All right, next one. This is an interesting one. I don't know if you have feedback on this. So I'll jump in on the first one from Jose. What do you think about telescopic rods? Are they any good? And I will tell you, full disclosure, I have extremely limited experience with telescopic rods, and it is not recent. But I will tell you this: the reason that it is limited is because I didn't like them. They were difficult for me. Now the blanks are better. They essentially fish like 6-piece rods, which if they're constructed correctly, you should be fine with them. But I can't add anything more than I know they're good for travel, but you're probably not going to want them if you're going to be putting them through their paces through a full season of fishing. Pat, do you have any feedback on that? Do you have any telescoping rods?
No, I haven't used a telescopic rod, but just to piggyback on what you said, I do own several travel rods, and those multi-piece travel rods, those 3-piece travel rods, they're built so good now. If I put one in your hands and you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know it was not a 1-piece rod. So if you're looking for something that's going to save space, then you definitely look into a nice quality travel rod. Daiwa makes some, TFO makes some, St. Croix has them. They do cost a little bit more, but like Rich said, it'll last you a lot longer.
Yeah. All right. We had some shenanigans in the chat that I had to deal with. Sorry. Let's see. We've got, I just want to bring this up as a comment from Cody. That wind to water heat exchange tip has been a key lately. What up, Pat? Yeah. So one thing that we've talked about, and actually I think this is referring to, well, we've talked about it a few times, but I also did a video on it. I think it's a public video on YouTube. The wind and the water exchange heat. And it's an important part for people to remember when you're getting back on the water and it's cooler, right? Especially in the spring, because you're coming from a time where the depressed water temperatures tend to make the fish in that area more lethargic. So they tend to try to hunker down in the deeper waters, hopefully water that's deep enough to have a thermocline where they can maintain a consistent temperature, and it's less stress on them. It's less calories that they need to burn to stay alive. And then they'll feed up typically in shallower, warmer areas during the day. And one of the things that you keep in mind is the wind and that's impact on the water temperatures. And a lot of people don't think about it this way, but if you have cold water and you have a warm wind or a warmer wind blowing across that water, you want to find an area where that wind is stirring up the water, or the water is already stirred up and the wind's hitting it. So it's typically a wind-blown shoreline, because what will happen then is the heat from that warmer air is exchanged with that water that now has more surface area because it's churned up by the wind, or maybe it's churned up from going up against the marshes or a beach, and it'll start to heat that water. It doesn't have to heat it a lot. It could only be 1/10 of a degree. It could be a full degree. Some places will be 3 or 4 degrees warmer, but that's often the temperature change that you need in order to find those more active feeding fish. Doesn't mean they're all going to be sitting there all day, but they tend, when they get to be more active, to move into those shallower areas, those warmer areas, and get their feed going. So that's something that everybody should keep in mind in the spring. And in the fall, where you have the warmer temperatures and the colder airs, it's reversed, right? So often the warmer water is going to be the part that is, or the colder water is going to be the part that's wind blown. So keep that in mind. But it's not a hard and fast rule. In the spring, fish the wind blown. No, if it's a cold wind and it's colder than the water temperature, don't fish the wind blown side. I mean, you could, but don't think that that's just going to be, it's wind blown, go there. No, it's all about the exchange of heat between the wind and the water. All right. Let's see. Next question. Here we go. From Parrish, Florida. Ideas. Pompano. Okay. Pompano activity in Tampa, St. Pete. Pat, what can you tell us about that?
I'm not seeing a whole lot of reports. I'm seeing, some catch here and there, but I haven't seen a whole lot of, just mass catches where people are getting a lot of them. I have seen inshore, they catch them inshore, not just in the surf. But as far as, solid leads or anything like that, I really don't have any information that's, that's going to help in that area. I do know on the East Coast, they are catching them in the surf now. They have a lack of sand fleas over there, so they catch them on shrimp. But over in the Tampa St. Pete area, again, that red tide's starting to kick in, and it's starting to be tough over there.
Yeah, and I do follow Florida very closely, mainly because of my job. And I am not seeing a lot of pompano outside of the surf on the East Coast. But it seems to be decent in picking up, but it's not gangbusters out there yet. Let's just put it that way. This is a good one, Pat. And again, this is your opinion. And let's talk topwater again. So you have a bluebird day. What's your take on using topwater on a day like that?
Well, it's funny that you asked this question. So my biggest trout ever, 28.5 inches, was caught in a tournament on a bluebird sky day, and it was called One Launch, One Lure. Everybody had to launch from the same exact spot, and we all had to use the same exact unmodified lure, which was a bone-colored Super Spook Junior. The whole tournament had to use that, and again, it was a glass calm day. It was the absolute worst conditions for a topwater bite, but I absolutely killed it that day. I was one of the only ones that caught fish that day, but it was all about the retrieve. So whenever you get bluebird sky days and it's calm out there, you have to slow your retrieve down. Think high pressure system. These fish are not going to be very aggressive, but what you can do is sometimes with a noisy lure is you can just agitate them into biting. So real slow twitches, keeping the lure almost in the same spot as long as you can. And yeah, you can do it. Now, would I recommend it? No. I'm going to throw a subsurface lure every time if I have the choice. But if you're addicted to topwater like I am, then yeah, you can catch them on a bluebird sky day. Not the best time to do it, but it is possible.
Yeah, and I'll just say again, there are captains up here that make a living just on topwater throughout the entire year, and it doesn't matter if it's bright sun, if it's raining, cloudy. They're using topwater, so yes, you can use them. Again, I'm not going to that first. I tend to use those, and I tend to use them more often than a lot of people. I actually use them in the pitch black, which people say you can't catch fish. And I part of it, I think, is just so I can prove them wrong. You know, catching a striped bass on a topwater at 3 a.m. is a lot of fun. But with that said, the best time for me is first light, last light, and cloudy days. It seems to just kind of linger. So if you have clouds, heavy clouds, you can often fish those before it gets better to use the paddle tails till 10 a.m., 11 a.m. And then I'll still switch over to a different soft plastic usually, or maybe not even a soft plastic, something subsurface just seems to work better.
Yeah, and sometimes what'll happen too is dirty water will extend the topwater bite too, because it allows less light penetration. So if you got crystal clear water, that topwater bite has a tendency to shut off sooner than it does in dirty water. So another little tip there.
Yeah, I'll give one final tip. And this, if you didn't listen to the podcast with Joe and Luke last week talking about the scents in the water, one of the important things and one of the lessons that came out of that, and this is all scientific research that declared this, you should be putting scents on your topwaters. And a lot of people think you shouldn't, but putting a scent on that topwater can increase that hookup. What is it? The strike rate by 2 times, I think it was, if I remember correctly. I've watched so many videos and listened to so many podcasts since, but I think it was 2x. So, you know, don't be afraid to put that scent on there and cast it out there and take advantage of that added benefit. And that will certainly help. And that'll certainly help extend the bite a little later in the day if you really want to use those. All right. So this is a good one. Now, he's asking about sea trout. So I'll let you start on this. But I like this first part. I'm new to marsh fishing, and I am absolutely addicted to fishing in the backwater marshes. Again, mid-Atlantic and Northeast, but a lot of the same things are going to hold true. But any tips on catching sea trout in new areas?
Yeah. So when it comes to sea trout and the marshes, it really has to do with the trends. So in the wintertime, whenever the water temperature drops, what'll happen is these trout will move up in the deepest, furthest back creeks that they can in these deep bends. And the reason why they do that is because the temperature at the bottom of those deep bends is going to stay consistent and it's going to stay warm. It might not necessarily be the warmest water, but what'll happen is it'll just stay consistent. Fish don't like a big, drop and rise in temperature. They want something more consistent. And that's what those deep creeks offer. Now, as the springtime comes along and then things start warming up, these fish are going to move out further from these creeks. And, by the time you hit mid-spring, and of course, I'm talking, down south, these fish are going to be pretty much at the mouths of these creeks, and they're going to be ambushing any of the bait that's getting flushed out. Well, whatever direction the tide's going, I do like an outgoing tide typically because it flushes a lot of that stuff out. And then come summertime, what's going to happen is these fish are going to move more to open water haunts where they're going to find some more hard structure out there. So your best time for me when it comes to trout fishing, in marshes is going to be in the winter time. Now your redfish, they're going to redfish and flounder. You'll get some holdover flounder that'll stay there year round, but typically summer's better for those, and redfish are going to be there year round. You're just going to follow whatever trend that they go. They'll kind of follow the trout in the winter time, and then in the summertime they'll come out, but they won't move necessarily all the way out to deep water. They'll kind of hang out in the marshes year round.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because I do absolutely love marsh fishing. One of the things that you need to keep in mind is that it's instant structure. There, you are surrounded by structure when you're along the marshes. If you can find what we call a deep drop sod bank or a marsh bank, where it goes basically from the weeds growing out the top, the grass growing out the top of the marsh, and it's a straight drop, and it drops even if it's only 3 or 4 feet. Now, I know that's probably deep for some areas in Florida, but talk relative. For up here, it'll drop into a 20-foot channel in seconds. And in one spot, I fish a 30-foot channel within one step. That's a deep drop sod bank. It's deep drop if you go from the grass and you're up to your waist in water. You have that water there. Now, that structure along that marsh bank is often going to create little rips in the current as it flows by. And that's where you want to look at those eddies that are coming off on there. Look for the current seams and then try to visualize what that's doing to the bait fish underneath. Now, a lot of the bait fish, they can swim through those currents, but they will get spun out and into predictable areas like the eddies. If you're talking grass shrimp, if you're talking small crabs that are coming off of those marshes, they will often just get thrown right into the eddy. And that's where these predator fish are going to sit. And the trout, whether you're talking specks or if you call a weak fish a trout, they're all going to be sitting in those ambush spots, just waiting for that free food conveyor belt to come right around the corner and right at them. So a lot of people, when they fish the marshes, they go right to the middle of the channel and they find the deepest spot. But that's not always the best spot. You want to find that structure. You have the structure along the side. If you can find structure along the side and then combine that with some structure on the bottom, that's where I would be looking for them at the macro level. That's where I'd be looking for any type of fish that's an ambush predator back there. And again, I absolutely, you can tell, I love marsh fishing. Stick me in a marsh and I'm happy for the entire day. Got a couple of other questions here that I want to touch on. Want to try to get to all of them, and they're not necessarily in order, guys. So this one from Robert Rogers: is it better to tie a leader directly to lures or use snap or power clips? Pat?
I am not a fan of adding terminal tackle to where you don't need it, because I believe it adds a point of failure. So you got to tie a knot to the terminal clip, and then you got to put the metal clip on the lure, and that's just, now you got 2 points of failure, whereas a knot directly tied is just 1 point of failure. So not a fan of it. I like using a pretty much on all my lures. I can use a non-slip loop knot, and then if I'm using a hook, with some bait on it, which is something I hardly never use, but I'll just use a snug knot. But basically my rigging hooks for my soft plastics and my hard lures get non-slip loop knots direct tied.
Yeah, so I actually go both ways on this question. There are times where I use those tactical angler clips, and one of the biggest things that you hear about them is they never fail. That's a lie. They do fail. I've had them fail. I've lost lures because they came off of those darn clips. However, if I'm going to a spot, for example, if I'm looking for blitzing striped bass and I'm going down to a beach, or I'm going to be in an area that's heavily populated with other fishermen, I will often use that TA clip just because I can switch the lures very fast and I don't lose my spot in the line. Otherwise, when I'm on the kayak, I do not have any clips on board. I don't have them in the boxes that I bring. They are only in my surf gear bag. So there are times to use them, but know that they do fail. And if you're going to use one, use a tactical angler type of clip. The snap swivels, they bend out very easily. They're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. I would never use one of those. And I haven't used one of those since I was a little kid. The only time you use those, in my opinion, is when you have somebody that, I don't know, you're fishing for little flounder, like kids. It does make it easier when you're changing out lures for kids and everything like that. It's just an easy way to do it. It's an easy way for them, but I don't like it. And a big thing is, as Pat said, it's a point of failure. So if you can tie good knots, tie a good FG knot or a good uni to uni knot, you know how to tie a loop knot, which is, by the way, the easiest knot to tie in the world, you're good. Even if you should use a snug knot, you can often get away with a loop knot. So if you know those two knots, you're golden and you don't have a reason to use them. That's my opinion on it. I just don't like all that extra hardware. It's things to snag, it's things to break. I don't know. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore.
Now, one thing I will add to that, though, is I understand there's some people with physical limitations, whether it be arthritis in their fingers, the loss of dexterity. Yeah, go ahead, do what you got to do. But if you have the ability, then I'm going to always say just go with the knot.
That's a really good point. If you're night fishing, as an example, if you can't tie an FG knot in the dark, then yes, there's a pretty good case to use the clips. If you can't tie one in the wind very easily, that's a good case to use one as well. I actually practiced tying the FG knot with my eyes closed so I can do that, but the wind does still mess me up on the kayak sometimes. So I understand it. So I don't want to make it sound like no, never, but for me, no, I don't even bring them with me unless I'm surf fishing. All right, this one's a good question from Tim Nicholson. How far north will Sheepshead come? Will they travel up the Chesapeake Bay? So I have a half answer for this, and I apologize for that because I'm not sure exactly how far up the Chesapeake they'll go because of the brackish water. You know, they're going to want to stick closer to the salt, but I will say, as far as quote unquote coming north, I've caught 27. I think a 27 inch is my largest, and I think it was bigger, but it had a half a tail. So 27-inch sheepshead in New Jersey, and I know guys that are catching them up in New York. So as far as coastal areas, they will come north, and they will continue up north all the way into New York. As far as Chesapeake Bay, I wish I could tell you. I'm not sure. The only place, and I've tried to look into this, and the only answers I've gotten was come down and fish and figure it out, or I've only caught them at the Bay Bridge, the Southern Bay Bridge. So, you know, going into what is it, Norfolk area. That's about as far as I've heard. I do believe they get up at least as far as the Potomac, but I really don't have any hard evidence besides an occasional catch that I have seen in the Chesapeake. So I will have to say, I apologize, Tim. I'm not sure. Pat, do you have any information on that you could provide?
Not on the Sheepshead. No, fished for redfish when I was up there and did well, but I can't tell you anything about the Sheepshead.
Yeah. It's, the sheepshead is a big emerging species again in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and I just haven't looked at it from the Chesapeake Bay side, but I will take a look at it this summer, and I will throw some baits out there and see how far into the brackish we can get before it's a no-go. All right, we have, let's see. There's another question here from Jose. We only have about 10 minutes left, guys. So if you have any other questions, throw them in and we'll try to get through all of them. Have you done any slip bobber fishing, Pat?
Yeah, actually, that is a really common thing to do, especially in Georgia. And that's where I did it. And the way you were describing fishing the marshes up where you're at is almost exactly how Georgia is, where you step 1 foot out and you could be 20 feet deep. Well, the trout, what they'll do is as the tide goes in and out, they won't necessarily move up and down, the bank, because there is no bank to move up and down. They'll move up and down the wall there. So using a slip bobber is really the best way to target them. So as that tide comes in, you'll make your slip bobber leader longer so you can drop down there and get to them, and then you can move it up shallower as the tide goes out. It's an excellent way, especially when you have large tidal fluctuations. Like in Georgia, it's not uncommon to get 8, 9, 10 feet of tide fluctuation, and that's really a great way to target fish that way.
Very good. Yeah, I've used slip bobbers. It is not something that I do often. I'll use just a regular popping cork from time to time. I do carry 2 of those on me at all times. But by the way, for striped bass, if you haven't used them, you're missing out. So use those. Use the popping corks, the slip bobbers. I've only used them a couple times, and quite frankly, I've used them down south for freshwater. So I can't really comment a ton on that one. Here's an interesting question that I think we can both give our feedback on from Swinger. What are the best hooks for sheepshead? I can tell you what I use. I use what are called jawbreakers or shepherd jigs, and they're from Captain Hank's Tackle. So they're really that bottom sweeper style of hook. And I wish I had one here, but I actually took them all downstairs. it's basically the way to the. It's just a really short jig with the big lead head, and then the one that I use that Captain Hanks has a sickle hook on it. I like that type of hook. If you want to see more information on it, there is a video on Salt Strong on YouTube for best sheepshead baits and how to rig the baits, and you'll see exactly why I like it. It's the way that I'm able to rig the baits that that really drew me to that style of hook, and it just works really well. With that said, I've seen people catch them on just circle hooks. I've seen them catch them on J hooks. Pat, what's your favorite?
Yeah, I think if you're vertical jigging, if you're up against the bridge pylons or the dock pylons, I like using that bottom sweeper style jig head. That works good. But say if you're throwing a Carolina rig, I like using a mosquito hook because the thin wire diameter will penetrate the mouth a little bit better. I don't like using a circle hook just because of how bony the structure of their mouth is. I like using a regular mosquito jig hook.
Gotcha. All right. Let me ask you this. What's your favorite baits for it? Even though that wasn't asked.
It's you can't beat a fiddler crab. That's the best.
Yeah. I like the fit. You know what? I change my answer like every day, I think, but I would say the top three are the fiddler crabs. There's just something about them that just draws those fish in. Shrimp is also a good one, and sand fleas. Just keep in mind, if you're dropping shrimp, you're going to catch 99.997% of the other fish that are in the area as well. So if you want to get tight lines with the kid out there with you, go to the shrimp first, and you're almost guaranteed that you're going to be pulling everything up at that point. All right, so we have from Bob some information. Let's see, here we go. Current break kayak fishing. Sheepshead can be caught in the Chesapeake on the pilings in the southern portion. The ships at So the southern part. I don't know how far north though, but it just kind of validates, that they are down in the southern portion. I'm gonna have to get out there and maybe do a video on that. Then maybe that's where we can meet, Pat. We can get out there and we can fish and try to dial in on the Sheepshead. All right, so I think we got through most. The last question that I'm going to throw up here, unless somebody tries to sneak one in, was kind of a comical one. Let me see if I can find it. And if not, I can just, all right, I'll paraphrase it. All right, if you added up, Pat, all the fish that you caught and kept, or no, if you take a look at all the money that you spent on fish at a fish market, does the cost of your tackle come anywhere close to that, or are you spending more on tackle? I think it's the old question. I think it's the old question. Why don't you just go to the fish market? It's cheaper. I think we're both in the position where we spend much more on tackle and trips and so on and so forth than the value of the fish that we catch and keep. Well, definitely.
I'm about ready to blow everybody's mind. I don't eat fish. I haven't kept a fish in years, decades probably. I don't eat fish, and people look at me weird. It's like, why do you do this? I love the hunt. I love the puzzle. I love putting it together, and that tug is the drug. But yeah, I've ate fish here and there, but as far as I can't tell you the last time I cleaned a fish. Might have been when I was a kid.
Man, I do keep the fish, not all the time. I throw back, during the course of the year, I throw back probably 95+%. I do like to keep the flounder because I do like to eat those, and I do like to keep a couple of tog. But there's only one fish that I don't like, and that's salmon. Otherwise, I like pretty much all of them. And I used to work in a fish market, so I got to sample all different kinds and mostly raw, but it was I'm definitely a fan of fish, but I do throw back the vast majority. As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation today. I only keep one striped bass a year if I can manage it, and that's typically going to be one that's gut hooked or is just not reviving, and I don't keep one on purpose until that happens. But if it doesn't happen by Thanksgiving, I'll pull one Thanksgiving week because we like to have striped bass around the holiday. But for the most part, I'm throwing them back. I got some really nice sheepshead this year, threw them all back. Every single weak fish went back. I only kept one bluefish this year, but he kind of killed himself by going crazy when he fell in the deck of the kayak. He ended up getting impaled. But yeah, I pretty well throw them all back as well. All right, so I think that's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the most common things that happens on my videos when I make them is when I'll let a 20 or 23-inch flounder go, and people just they don't understand it. I'm just here for the catching.
Yeah, well, I mean, 20, 23-inch. I mean, those are some nice fish. Especially it depends on where you're fishing. If that's a southern flounder, that's a really, really good fish. For a summer flounder, it's still a good fish. But if you're fishing and you're catching a southern flounder that size, you're right up near the top of that range. I think they only get up to 28. So yeah, I can see the pain that people have putting in all that time trying to, get some dinners, and there you are releasing them. I think we've all had that though. You've had that on the water. People come up to you and they ask if they can keep your fish when they see you throwing them back.
I've had that happen, but I've also given my fish away in those situations where I know, it had a high mortality rate. It's it's not gonna make it.
Yeah.
I've given it away. So I'm not saying that, I've never, not taken a fish. if the fish is not going to make it, it seems wasteful to throw it back in. I typically will find somebody that can use it. And that's never been an issue. Always been able to find one.
Yeah. As long as you don't have to clean it. Right. I mean, that's the key. I personally don't like cleaning fish, mainly because I have typically a 2 to 3 hour drive to get home afterwards. And I just want to get off the water and get home. So maybe that also weighs a little bit in on my releases. But with that said, as one comment said, if it's legal, I keep it. Well, if it's legal, go ahead and keep it. I'm not going to judge you for it. I just tend to throw a lot of mine back. And I tend to also run into a lot of sharks because I use a stringer quite often to bleed them out, and you got to be careful with that. It's probably better just to throw it on the ice right away, but I tend to bleed them first, which can be difficult, especially back in the marshes, because that's where a lot of sharks are kind of prowling around. Mm-hmm. So that's going to cover, I think, most of the questions, if not all. If I missed any, guys, I apologize. I tried to get to all of them. And if you're an insider and you have any questions, ask it in the community, put it under the Ask a Coach tag, and Pat and I will be in there along with the other coaches. And of course, as you know, 35,000 plus other members taking a look at your question, and you're going to get some outstanding answers. If you're not an insider already, I don't know what you're waiting for. The stuff that goes in there is just amazing. I've talked to some people at the fishing show a couple of weekends ago, and they're saying, yeah, I watch all the Salt Strong stuff. I said, oh, you remember? And they said, well, I subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm like, that's awesome. But you have to know that this week I did 11 videos and none of them made it to YouTube. And they just looked at me and they're like, well, what are you doing with them? I said, that's all for the community. I mean, they're getting all of those. So, talk about spot dissections, which is funny because, Pat, when I started this live stream on my own YouTube channel, the first one I did was live spot dissections. Before spot dissections were a thing, I was showing people where to fish and why and that kind of thing. But there, you have the spot dissections in there. You have the weekend game plans, which are amazing. So you have the coaches plus guides putting out there. Here's the report, and here's what you should do going forward through the weekend to catch fish. You got the tackle discounts at 20%. So there's a lot. So guys, you should check it out. Go over to saltstrong.com. If you're already a member, again, just ask your questions in there and in the community, and we'll jump on there and give you an answer. Hopefully more than one of us will. So you get a couple of different viewpoints as well. So, All right, Pat, anything you wanted to add before we go?
No, I was just going to add to the fact that, talking about the insider community and how effective it is. When I'm a bass guy my whole life, and I went and I messed up. I went and caught a redfish, and I was addicted. That's it. That's all I had to do was I wanted to catch more redfish. I struggled with it for years, and I joined Salt Strong, and now not only am I proficient at catching inshore fish, now I teach other people to do it. And pretty much everything that I've learned was from Salt Strong. I can't tell you how much of a difference it has made in my fishing game.
Yeah, I've said often, and this is before I came on as a coach. I've bought boats. I have bought tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, kayaks, everything you can imagine, seminars, personal lessons, guides. I've spent money on all of that, and the single best purchase I ever made was Salt Strong. And it's just, sometimes something, but you need to see somebody else say it. And then it just kind of hits home. There are times, and I mentioned this as well, I have a flounder course, and I watch my own course that I made before every season because it reminds me of things that it's not top of mind. And Salt Strong has courses all over the place on everything from boat positioning to specific species. So if you want to talk about flounder or fluke, if you're one of my people up north, then there are multiple courses on that. Kayaks, multiple courses on that. So it's got everything. So I definitely recommend check it out. Go to saltstrong.com, take a look at it. And I'm going to say one thing that I never say on these. It would be helpful if you can throw some likes on this. It helps us out to get more viewers and play nicely with the YouTube algorithm. So that would also be helpful. So with that said, everybody, thanks for coming in. We'll be announcing at the end of this week our guests for this upcoming episode on Monday. So if you're in New Jersey, get out there and get those striped bass. If you're not in New Jersey, get out there where it's legal, get those striped bass. Down south, enjoy the weather. You guys are just blessed. Just enjoy it. Get out there and get some tight lines. So that's all I have to say. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Get out there, get on the water, get some tight lines.